Some nights, the silence becomes your enemy and what breaks it becomes your nightmare. The fluorescent lights hummed their usual tune as I stocked shelves during another graveyard shift at Megamart Express. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, and the 24-hour supermarket felt like a tomb. At 23, I'd grown accustomed to the eerie quiet of overnight retail work, but tonight something felt different. A distant crash echoed from the pasta aisle boxes tumbling, cans rolling across linoleum. My heart skipped. The automatic doors hadn't chimed their familiar greeting, which was impossible to miss given their deafening screech. Someone was inside, but how? That's when I saw him. He stood motionless at the mouth of aisle 7, a silhouette against the harsh lighting. His stare was vacant, unblinking like a mannequin someone had dressed and forgotten to animate. There was something fundamentally wrong with his face, as if someone had tried to sketch a human from memory and gotten the proportions slightly off. "Excuse me," his voice cut through the silence like chalk on a blackboard. "Where do you keep the milk?" I pointed toward the dairy section with trembling fingers, hoping he'd simply walk away. The interaction felt rehearsed, mechanical. But as I turned back to my work, trying to shake off the unease crawling up my spine, I realized this was only the beginning. Minutes later, he materialized in the snack aisle like a ghost stepping through walls. His movements were too quiet, too deliberate. The questions started innocent enough small talk about the weather, the late hour. Then they turned personal. "How old are you?" he asked, stepping closer. "Do you go to clubs on weekends? Got a boyfriend?" Before he could answer, his hand landed on my shoulder with the weight of a stone. His fingers were ice cold even through my uniform shirt. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I mumbled an excuse about inventory and escaped to the storage room, my hands shaking as I locked the door behind me. 25 minutes crawled by like hours. The store had returned to its tomb-like silence. I was wrong. The employee restroom sat in the back corner of the store, past the pharmacy and behind the customer service desk. As I pushed open the door, every muscle in my body tensed. Something felt off. The air was too still, too expectant. Inside the stall, I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. The man was probably long gone, wandering some other late-night establishment. But then I heard the soft whisper of the bathroom door opening, followed by footsteps that seemed to echo my own heartbeat. I lifted my feet from the floor and held my breath. Through the gap beneath the stall door, I could see she used the same worn sneakers I'd noticed earlier. My blood turned to ice water. Then came the eye. A single, unblinking eye pressed against the crack in the door, searching. The pupil was dilated, predatory. In that moment, I understood with crystal clarity that this wasn't some awkward customer making conversation. This was something else entirely, something that had been hunting me from the moment those boxes fell in aisle 7. My scream shattered the silence like breaking glass. Without thinking, I grabbed the box cutter from my pocket and slashed wildly through the gap. The blade found its mark, and I heard him stumble backward with a grunt of surprise. I kicked the stall door open with every ounce of strength I possessed. It connected with his face in a satisfying crunch, and he staggered into the sinks. I didn't wait to see if he'd recover. I ran past the registers, through the automatic doors, into the parking lot where my car waited like salvation. The police arrived 37 minutes later, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they searched every aisle, every corner, every shadow. But the Megamart was empty except for overturned displays and a few drops of blood on the bathroom floor. He had vanished as silently as he'd appeared. I submitted my 2 weeks' notice the next morning, though I only worked 2 more overnight shifts before management agreed to transfer me to days. Sometimes, in the small hours when sleep won't come, I wonder if he's still out there stalking some other 24-hour establishment, hunting some other unsuspecting night shift worker. The fluorescent lights still hung their tune, but now I know what can hide in the silence between the notes. Some nights, it's not the darkness you should fear, it's what watches you from the light. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, even when you were completely alone? That creeping sensation that makes your skin crawl and your heart race? I thought I knew what fear was until I discovered the truth about who had been sharing my house. The harsh fluorescent lights of Night Owl Mart flickered overhead as I settled into another graveyard shift. It was 3:15 a.m. on a chilly November night, and the biting wind rattled the entrance doors with an eerie persistence. At 32, I'd been working these overnight shifts for 3 years, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. That's when he walked in. The stranger looked to be in his early 30s, disheveled and restless. His clothes hung loose on his thin frame, and his eyes darted nervously around the store as if he were seeing things no one else could. What unsettled me most was the way he tilted his head back and started yelling at the ceiling tiles, not words, but guttural haunting sounds that sent a shiver down my spine. My first instinct was compassion. Working nights, you meet all kinds of people battling their own demons. I thought maybe he had some kind of mental illness or was going through a crisis. When he wandered the aisles for nearly 20 minutes without buying anything, I grabbed a bag of pretzels from behind the counter and offered it to him. "Here, take these," I said softly, hoping to calm him. He snatched the bag without a word and shuffled out into the cold night, leaving me with a strange, uneasy feeling. An hour later, the store phone shattered the silence. I answered with my usual greeting, but instead of a customer's voice, I heard those same chilling noises, the exact guttural sounds the man had made inside the store. My blood ran cold as I realized it was him, somehow having found our business number. The line went dead. I tried to convince myself it was a prank or a coincidence. But when my shift ended at 7 a.m. and I finally arrived home to my modest house on Cedar Lane, my personal phone rang again. My hands trembled as I answered, and there it was once more, that same horrifying, unintelligible sound. This time, I hung up immediately, double-checked every lock, and tried to calm my racing heart before attempting to sleep. For weeks, I lived in constant fear. Every unexpected noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed to twist with menace. But as days passed without incident, I began to hope it was over. Maybe the man had moved on or found help. I was wrong. One cold Saturday afternoon in December, I ventured into my basement to retrieve some old holiday decorations. The wooden stairs creaked beneath me as I descended into the damp, musty darkness. I pulled the chain to light the single bare bulb, and what I saw stopped me cold. Papers were strewn across the concrete floor like autumn leaves. But these weren't random scraps, they were torn pages from phone books, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. My hands shook as I knelt to read them. In the corner, my tool closet had been ransacked. Among the scattered tools, several kitchen knives gleamed under the dull light knives that definitely didn't belong to me. But it was the far wall that nearly broke me. Scrawled in black marker were 3 addresses: Night Owl Mart, 5632 Elmwood Drive, E742 Cedar Lane, and beneath them, in larger, frantic handwriting, "He works nights. He lives alone. My work address. My home address. Details about my life no stranger should know." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This man had been living beneath my house for weeks, maybe months. While I slept above, he had been down there, watching, planning, learning my every move. The calls hadn't been random harassment, they were part of something far more sinister. I called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, Every trace of him was gone. The papers, the knives, even the writing on the wall vanished, as if they had never existed. The officers were sympathetic but powerless without evidence. That was 9 months ago. Since then, I've moved across town, switched to day shifts, and installed a security system that would make a bank jealous. But the questions still haunt me in the quiet moments before dawn. How long had he been there? What was he planning with those knives? And most terrifying of all, why did he disappear so completely, leaving no trace? Sometimes I wonder if he's found another basement to call home, another person to watch and terrorize. The thought keeps me awake at night, knowing someone else might be living unknowingly above their worst nightmare. I still don't know why he chose me or why he vanished so suddenly. But I've learned that sometimes the scariest monsters are the invisible ones, the ones who watch from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The question that haunts me most isn't what he wanted, it's whether he's truly gone or just better at hiding. Some nights, the darkness holds secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. For Officer Liam Harper, patrol duty in the rural outskirts of Millbrook County would forever change after what he found in those endless rows of soybeans. The autumn air hung thick with moisture as I guided my patrol car down the gravel roads of Millbrook County's farming district. It was my third week with the K9 unit still green, still eager to prove myself worthy of my Belgian Malinois partner, Atlas. The clock on my dashboard read 2:47 a.m. when Atlas suddenly became restless in the back seat, his ears perked and nose twitching with an intensity I'd never seen before. That's when we saw it. A silver cargo van, doors flung wide like broken wings, sitting abandoned in the middle of Jensen's soybean field. The vehicle looked alien against the endless rows of crops, its metallic surface catching fragments of moonlight. No tire tracks led to it. No footprints disturbed the earth around it. It was as if the van had simply materialized from thin air. Atlas was pulling so hard against his leash that I could barely maintain control as we approached the vehicle. His usual disciplined demeanor had dissolved into something primal, whimpering, pacing, hackles raised. When I finally reached the rear of the van and peered into the cargo area, my stomach dropped into an abyss. 9 black body bags lay stacked like cordwood. Human feet pale, lifeless, protruded from torn zippers. The metallic smell of blood mixed with something far worse hung in the confined space. I stumbled backward, my dinner threatening to make a violent return as I fumbled for my radio with trembling fingers. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need immediate backup at the old Jensen farm on Hawthorne Lane. Multiple casualties. Possible homicide scene. As I waited for backup, the night seemed to close in around me. The gentle rustle of soybean leaves that had been a constant companion suddenly felt menacing. Atlas had gone completely silent, never a good sign. His body was coiled like a spring, every muscle taut as he stared into the crop rows surrounding us. Then I heard it. The soft snap of a dried stem. Then another. Something was moving through the field, circling us with deliberate stealth. Atlas erupted into action, tearing the leash from my grip as he launched himself into the dense vegetation. I drew my service weapon and followed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged animal. The sounds came from everywhere at once, rustling to my left, snapping twigs to my right, the whisper of disturbed leaves behind me. I was surrounded, trapped in a maze of green with a killer somewhere in the shadows. My flashlight beam cut weak paths through the darkness, revealing nothing but endless rows of soybeans swaying in the breeze. The arm that snaked around my throat came without warning. Iron-strong fingers dug into my windpipe as a voice, raspy and desperate, hissed in my ear. "You shouldn't have come here, pig." My vision began to blur as oxygen fled my lungs. The world tilted sideways, and I could feel my grip on consciousness slipping away like sand through fingers. This was E.T. was going to die in a soybean field, another victim for those black bags. Then Atlas's savage bark shattered the night, followed immediately by a scream that sounded barely human. My attacker's grip loosened as 75 pounds of trained fury clamped down on his leg. I gasped for air, spun around, and fired 3 shots center mass. The man crumpled to the earth between the soybean rows, his blood seeping into the rich soil. Atlas and I ran. We ran like our lives depended on which they probably did. By the time backup arrived 15 minutes later, the van had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. The only evidence of our encounter was the dead man in the field and my shattered nerves. The investigation went nowhere. No fingerprints, no DNA matches, no missing person reports that fit the description. The dead man was a ghost, and whoever had been driving that van of horrors had melted back into the darkness from which they came. 3 years have passed since that night in Jensen's field, but the guilt follows me like a shadow. I replay those moments endlessly. Should I have stayed to investigate further? Could I have saved those 9 victims if I hadn't run? Did my fear allow a killer to escape and claim more lives? Atlas retired early after that night. He never quite recovered from whatever he experienced in those soybean rows. Sometimes I catch him staring out at the fields during our evening walks, his ears perked as if he's still listening for something moving through the crops. The truth is, some cases never close. Some monsters slip away into the night, leaving only questions and the haunting knowledge that somewhere out there, evil walks free. And sometimes, when the autumn wind rustles through the soybeans, I still wonder if they're coming back to finish what they started. The darkness holds its secrets tight, but for those who've glimpsed what lurks within, the shadows never feel quite the same again.